I stood at the edge of what used to be my grandfather's wheat field, watching a massive concrete mixer pour another foundation slab where Sarah's garden once bloomed. The morning sun cast long shadows across bulldozers and excavators that had no right to be here. No right to exist on land my family had owned for 3 generations. The construction foreman looked up from his clipboard and spotted me standing there in disbelief. He walked over with the casual confidence of a man who thought he owned the world. "You need to move along, buddy. This is private property now." I felt something cold settle in my chest as I stared at this stranger telling me to leave my own land. Behind him, workers were laying the foundation for what looked like a luxury hotel, right where my wife used to pick tomatoes every summer morning. That is when I realized they had not just stolen my farm. They had walked straight into the biggest legal trap of their lives. My name is David Chen, and for 15 years I lived the kind of life most people only dream about. 40 acres of rolling hills in rural Pennsylvania, inherited from my grandfather who built every fence post and barn beam with his own hands. The farmhouse dated back to 1892, with a wraparound porch that caught the sunrise perfectly every morning. Sarah and I would sit on that porch with our coffee, watching the mist rise from the pond while cardinals sang in the old oak trees. She had transformed the back acre into a vegetable garden that fed half the neighborhood. Tomatoes, cucumbers, corn, and her prize-winning pumpkins that took blue ribbons at the county fair 3 years running. We were not wealthy people. I worked construction in town while Sarah taught third grade at the local elementary school. But we had something money could not buy. We had peace. We had land that belonged to us, truly belonged to us, passed down through generations of hard work and sacrifice. The neighbors were good people too. Old Martha Henderson lived in the farmhouse next door with her cats and her apple trees. The Johnson family ran cattle on the property to our east. We all looked out for each other, borrowed tools, shared vegetables from our gardens, and gathered for barbecues on summer evenings. Then everything changed in a single phone call on a Tuesday morning in March. Sarah had been feeling tired for weeks, but we thought it was just stress from the school year. The doctor's voice was gentle but firm. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 6 months if we were lucky. We fought it with everything we had. Chemotherapy, radiation, experimental treatments that drained our savings and filled our house with the smell of sickness. Sarah stayed strong through it all, still tending her garden between treatments, still smiling when I caught her crying in the kitchen. She passed away on a quiet September evening, holding my hand as the sun set through the bedroom window. I buried her in the cemetery next to my grandfather, under the willow tree where we had our first kiss 20 years earlier. The grief hit me like a physical weight that never lifted. I stopped sleeping, stopped eating, stopped caring about anything except the bottle of whiskey that became my constant companion. The farm fell into disrepair. Weeds overtook Sarah's garden. The house felt like a tomb filled with memories I could not bear to face. My sister Janet finally intervened after she found me passed out on the kitchen floor. She convinced me to take a trip, to get away from the ghosts that haunted every corner of our home. I booked a 6-month journey through Europe, following the travel plan Sarah and I had made for our retirement. Before leaving, I made careful preparations. I hired a property management company to check on the house monthly. I asked Martha Henderson to keep an eye on things and gave her my contact information. I arranged for the county to maintain the access road and ensure the property taxes stayed current. On a cold February morning, I locked the front door and drove away from the only home I had ever truly loved. The plan was simple: travel, grieve, heal, and return, ready to rebuild my life in the place where Sarah's memory lived strongest. I had no idea that 6 months later, I would return to find strangers building a hotel where my wife used to grow flowers. The plane landed at Philadelphia International on a humid August afternoon. I had been gone exactly 6 months and 2 days. My phone had died somewhere over the Atlantic, and I was eager to get home, to sit on the porch where Sarah and I had shared so many quiet mornings. The rental car ride through familiar countryside should have been comforting. The same rolling hills, the same winding roads, the same red barns dotting the landscape. But as I turned onto Meadowbrook Road, something felt wrong. There was too much traffic for a rural area, too many commercial vehicles heading in the direction of my farm. I crested the hill that overlooked my property and slammed on the brakes so hard the car behind me honked and swerved around. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel, trying to process what I was seeing. Massive construction vehicles covered my land like a swarm of metal insects. Bulldozers, excavators, concrete mixers, and dump trucks moved across the back 30 acres where Sarah's garden used to bloom. The foundation of a large building was already poured, with steel framework rising from the concrete like the skeleton of some enormous beast. I pulled into my own driveway and sat for a moment, breathing hard. This had to be a mistake, some kind of surveying error. Nobody could just build on private property without permission, not in America, not on land my family had owned for generations. The construction foreman noticed me immediately. He was a big man in a hard hat and reflective safety vest, carrying a clipboard and radiating the kind of authority that comes from years of telling people what to do. He walked over to my rental car with the confident stride of someone who belonged here. "You need to move along, buddy. This is private property now." I got out of the car slowly, my legs unsteady. "Private property. This is my land. I own this farm." He looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "No, sir, you do not. This entire back section belongs to the Meadowbrook Homeowners Association. We have full legal authorization to develop this property into a luxury resort hotel." The words hit me like physical blows. Homeowners Association, resort hotel, legal authorization. None of it made sense. I had never lived in a subdivision. There was no HOA when I left 6 months ago. "That is impossible," I said, my voice coming out as a whisper. "My grandfather bought this land in 1943. I have the deed. I pay the taxes." The foreman shrugged and pulled out his clipboard. "Take it up with the county if you want, but we have permits signed by Victoria Sterling, president of the Meadowbrook HOA. Everything is legal and proper." He showed me official-looking documents with county seals and signatures. Development permits, environmental clearances, zoning variances. My name appeared nowhere on any of them. Instead, they all referenced something called the Meadowbrook Community Development Zone and gave complete authority to someone named Victoria Sterling. "Where did these HOA people come from?" I asked, but the foreman was already walking away. "Not my job to explain local politics, buddy. My job is to build this hotel." I walked toward my farmhouse on unsteady legs, passing construction signs that had been planted all over my property. "Future site of Meadowbrook Luxury Resort and Spa. No trespassing, authorized personnel only. Construction zone, hard hats required." Martha Henderson was waiting on my front porch, tears streaming down her weathered face. She had aged 10 years in the 6 months I was gone. "David, thank God you are back. I tried calling you dozens of times, but your phone went straight to voicemail. I did not know how to reach you." "Martha, what is happening here? Who are these people? She looked around nervously, as if afraid someone might be listening. They moved in about 3 months ago. Started with survey crews, then lawyers with papers, then the construction equipment. They claim the entire back section of your property was never legally yours. That is insane. My grandfather homesteaded this land. I know, honey. I tried to tell them, but they have lawyers and official documents. They said if I interfered or tried to contact you, they would sue me for obstruction of development. I felt something cold and hard settle in my stomach. This was not some bureaucratic mistake. This was organized, deliberate, and calculated. Someone had waited for me to leave, then moved in like predators targeting wounded prey. That night, I sat alone in my dark kitchen, listening to the sound of generators powering floodlights that turned my property into a 24-hour construction zone. The noise was constant, deliberate, designed to break my spirit before the real fight even began. But they had made one crucial mistake. They thought grief had made me weak. They thought I would roll over and accept their theft because I was too broken to fight back. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The next morning, I drove straight to the county courthouse, a brick building that had stood in the center of town since before my grandfather was born. The property records office was on the second floor, managed by Martha Whitfield, a 70-year-old woman who had been keeping track of land ownership in our county for over 4 decades. "David Chen," she said when I walked in, "I wondered when you would show up. I heard about the construction on your property." "Martha, I need to see every document filed regarding my land in the past 6 months. Something is very wrong here." She led me to a small room with boxes of files and a computer terminal. "Honey, you are not going to like what you find, but you need to see it all." The first document was filed just 2 weeks after I left for Europe. A claim that the back 30 acres of my property had been incorrectly surveyed in 1943, and that the land actually belonged to something called the Meadowbrook Community Development Trust. The paperwork was signed by Victoria Sterling and notarized by a county official I had never heard of. "Who is Victoria Sterling?" I asked. Martha lowered her voice. "She moved here about 5 years ago from Philadelphia. Former real estate lawyer with a lot of money and connections. She bought the old Morrison estate and immediately started organizing all the new subdivision developments." More documents followed. Environmental impact studies that cleared the land for commercial development. Zoning variances that changed my agricultural property to commercial resort use. Building permits for a 100-room luxury hotel with spa facilities and conference centers. Every single document was signed by Victoria Sterling and approved by county officials, who seemed to rubber stamp whatever she requested. "Martha, this is fraud. You cannot just file papers claiming someone else's land." "I know, honey, but look at this." She pulled out another file. "Victoria has done this before, 3 times in the past 2 years." The files showed a pattern. Elderly property owners or people going through personal crises. Complicated legal maneuvers that transferred their land to various HOA development trusts. In each case, the victims had been too overwhelmed or too poor to fight back effectively. "The Henderson place next to yours. She tried the same thing last year, but Martha Henderson's son is a lawyer in Pittsburgh. He shut it down fast. That might be why they waited for you to leave." I spent the entire day going through records, taking photos with my phone, and building a timeline of the conspiracy. Victoria Sterling had not just stolen my land. She had created an entire criminal enterprise disguised as community development. The hotel project was worth over $2 million according to the construction contracts. The financing came from shell companies registered in Delaware. The environmental clearances had been backdated after construction began. Half the county officials involved in approving the project had received campaign contributions from Victoria's various business entities. Martha, who else knows about this? More people than you might think, but Victoria Sterling has deep pockets and expensive lawyers. She also has something else. What? Fear. People are afraid of her. She has sued 3 families into bankruptcy over the past 2 years. Property disputes, HOA violations, harassment claims. She destroys anyone who stands up to her. I drove home that evening with a box full of photocopied documents and a growing understanding of what I was up against. This was not just about my land. Victoria Sterling was running a criminal organization that targeted vulnerable property owners and used the legal system as a weapon. The construction crews were still working under floodlights when I pulled into my driveway. The foundation was nearly complete, and steel framework was rising rapidly. They were moving fast, probably hoping to make the project too expensive to tear down by the time anyone could stop them. But I had something Victoria Sterling did not know about. I had time to grieve, time to heal, and time to get very, very angry. 6 months in Europe had not made me weak. It had given me perspective and clarity about what really mattered. My wife was gone, but her memory deserved better than watching strangers profit from destroying the land she had loved. My grandfather's legacy deserved better than being stolen by corrupt lawyers and bought officials. That night I made 2 phone calls. The first was to my old friend Jake Morrison, a retired FBI agent who now worked as a private investigator. The second was to the best property rights attorney in Philadelphia. Victoria Sterling wanted a fight. She was about to get one. Jake Morrison arrived at my farm the next morning in a black SUV, looking every bit the federal agent he had been for 25 years. We had served together in the Army Reserve and stayed friends through the decades. He was the kind of man who noticed everything and forgot nothing. Jesus, David. They really went all out, did not they? He stood at the edge of my property, watching bulldozers level the area where Sarah's vegetable garden used to grow. Jake, I need to know if this is as illegal as it looks, or if Victoria Sterling somehow found a legal way to steal my land. From what you showed me yesterday, this is fraud on a massive scale, but we need evidence that will hold up in federal court. These people are professionals. We spent the morning setting up surveillance equipment, tiny cameras hidden in trees that overlooked the construction site, audio recording devices that could pick up conversations from 300 yards away, a drone with a high-resolution camera that Jake operated from inside my house. The key is documenting everything, Jake explained. Every conversation, every document exchange, every violation of environmental law. We need to build an airtight case. The environmental violations became obvious within hours. The construction crews were dumping concrete washout directly into the stream that fed into the county watershed. They had filled in part of the wetland area without proper permits. Diesel fuel from the heavy equipment was leaking into soil that drained toward the municipal water supply. That alone is enough for federal environmental crimes, Jake said, but we need to connect it directly to Victoria Sterling. She appeared on the 3rd day of surveillance, stepping out of a white Mercedes SUV like she owned the entire county. Victoria Sterling was everything I had expected. Perfectly dressed, perfectly confident, and perfectly aware that she held all the power in this situation. She talked with the construction foreman for 20 minutes, gesturing toward my farmhouse and clearly giving instructions. Our hidden microphones picked up enough to make me furious. The old man will probably try to cause trouble now that he is back. If he shows up here again, call the sheriff immediately. We cannot let him interfere with the construction timeline. What if he has lawyers? Let him waste his money. By the time any court case works its way through the system, this hotel will be open and generating revenue. Possession is 9/10 of the law. Jake and I looked at each other. Victoria Sterling had just admitted on tape that she knew the land ownership was questionable, and that she was racing to complete construction before legal challenges could stop her. But we needed more. Jake began running background checks on everyone involved in the project. The shell companies financing the construction traced back to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. The environmental consultant who had signed off on the wetland destruction had his license suspended in 3 other states for fraudulent reports. Most importantly, we discovered that Victoria Sterling had been using Meadowbrook HOA funds to finance her personal investment projects. Money that homeowners paid for community maintenance was being diverted into luxury hotel development and real estate speculation. David, this is not just fraud. This is racketeering. Victoria Sterling is running a criminal enterprise that spans multiple states and involves dozens of victims. The breakthrough came when Jake hacked into Victoria's email accounts. Federal crime, but Jake assured me his methods would never be traced back to us. What we found was devastating. Emails discussing bribes paid to county officials, correspondence with shell company directors in offshore tax havens, messages about forging property documents and backdating legal filings. Most damning of all, a detailed plan to target properties owned by elderly, sick, or absent owners. She has done this 17 times in 5 different counties over the past 3 years, Jake said. Your property is just the biggest score. We also found something else. Victoria Sterling was not just stealing land. She was laundering money for a Philadelphia crime family through her various development projects. The hotel construction was being financed with dirty money that needed to be cleaned through legitimate business investments. Jake, if we expose this, are we going to end up in witness protection? Not if we do it right. The FBI has been investigating money laundering in construction for years. Your case could be the key that breaks open a much larger criminal network. That night, Jake made a phone call to his former colleagues at the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. Within 48 hours, federal agents were reviewing our evidence and preparing warrants for Victoria Sterling and her entire organization. The trap was set. Victoria Sterling thought she was stealing land from a grieving widower who was too broken to fight back. Instead, she had walked into a federal investigation that would destroy her criminal empire and send her to prison for the rest of her life. All we had to do now was wait for her to make the final mistake that would spring the trap shut. Victoria Sterling discovered our surveillance operation on a Thursday morning when one of her construction workers spotted the camera hidden in the oak tree overlooking the hotel foundation. By noon, she was standing at my front door with 3 men who looked like they bench-pressed small cars for entertainment. I watched through the window as her white Mercedes pulled into my driveway, followed by a black Escalade carrying her security team. She stepped out wearing a designer business suit that probably cost more than most people make in a month. Everything about her screamed money, power, and the absolute confidence that she could crush anyone who stood in her way. The knock on my door was sharp and demanding. I opened it to find Victoria Sterling flanked by her 3 bodyguards, holding a manila folder thick with legal documents. David Chen, I presume. Her voice was honey over steel, the tone of someone accustomed to getting exactly what she wanted. "I think we need to have a conversation." "About you stealing my land? Sure, let us talk." She smiled, but it never reached her eyes. "Mr. Chen, you seem to be operating under several misunderstandings about the ownership of this property. Perhaps these documents will clarify the situation for you." The papers were impressive. Cease and desist orders from 3 different law firms. Court injunctions prohibiting me from interfering with authorized construction. Property ownership documents that claimed my grandfather had never legally owned the back 30 acres of the farm. "This is all fraudulent," I said, but Victoria Sterling just shrugged. "Mr. Chen, I understand you have been through a difficult time with your wife's passing. Grief can make people confused about reality, but the law is very clear about property ownership in this county." The mention of Sarah made something cold and hard settle in my chest. "Leave my wife out of this." "Of course. I simply want you to understand that continuing to fight this will only cause you more pain. Sarah would want you to move on with your life, not waste your remaining years in expensive legal battles you cannot win." One of her bodyguards shifted slightly, and I noticed the outline of a gun under his jacket. The message was clear. Victoria Sterling was not just threatening me legally. She was prepared to escalate this conflict to physical violence if necessary. "Ms. Sterling, I am not going anywhere. This is my land and I will fight for it in court." Her smile disappeared completely. "Mr. Chen, I have 17 lawyers on retainer and unlimited resources to pursue every legal remedy available. I will sue you for harassment, trespassing, interference with commerce, and defamation. By the time I am finished, you will lose not just this property, but everything you own." "We will see about that." She stepped closer, lowering her voice so her bodyguards could not hear. "I know all about your financial situation, David. The medical bills from your wife's cancer treatment. The mortgage you took out to pay for experimental treatments. You are one lawsuit away from bankruptcy." The fact that she knew intimate details about my personal finances was almost as terrifying as the physical threats. Victoria Sterling had done her homework. She knew exactly how to hurt me most effectively. "You have 48 hours to withdraw any legal challenges and sign a property release form. After that, things become much more difficult for you." They left without another word, but the message was clear. Victoria Sterling was done being subtle. She was moving to total war. That night, the harassment began in earnest. Construction crews started working around the clock with floodlights that turned night into day. Diesel generators ran constantly, filling the air with fumes and noise. Heavy equipment operated just yards from my bedroom window, making sleep impossible. When I called the county noise ordinance office, they told me the construction had special permits for 24-hour operation due to the urgent nature of the project. When I called the sheriff's department, they said they would send someone to investigate, but no one ever showed up. By the third night, I was hallucinating from sleep deprivation. The constant noise had become a form of psychological torture designed to break my will to resist. Victoria Sterling was not just stealing my land. She was trying to drive me insane. That is when Sheriff Bradley Morrison showed up at my door. I recognized him from town meetings and county fairs, a man who had held the job for 15 years and commanded respect throughout the community. "Mr. Chen, I need you to pack a bag and come with me." "Why, what have I done?" "You are being charged with criminal trespassing and harassment. Ms. Sterling has filed a restraining order requiring you to stay at least 500 yards away from the construction site." I stared at him in disbelief. "Sheriff, this is my property. You cannot arrest me for trespassing on my own land. Sir, I have court documents that say otherwise. You can come peacefully or I can arrest you. Your choice." The betrayal cut deeper than Victoria Sterling's threats. Sheriff Morrison had been to barbecues at this house. His kids had picked pumpkins from Sarah's garden. Now he was standing on my front porch, treating me like a criminal on my own property. "How much did she pay you, Bradley?" His face went red, but he did not deny it. "Mr. Chen, you are under arrest for criminal trespassing." As he put handcuffs on my wrists, I could see Victoria Sterling watching from beside the construction site, talking on her phone and smiling. She had bought the sheriff, the county officials, and probably half the local government. That night, sitting in a county jail cell, I realized that Victoria Sterling had made her final mistake. She thought she had eliminated every possible threat to her criminal enterprise. But she had forgotten about Jake Morrison and the federal agents who were watching every move she made. The trap was about to spring shut. I was released from county jail the next morning on my own recognizance, with a court date scheduled for the following month, and a restraining order prohibiting me from going within 500 yards of my own property. Victoria Sterling had effectively made me homeless through legal manipulation and corrupt officials. But as I walked out of the courthouse, Jake Morrison was waiting for me with a smile that told me everything I needed to know. "David, I hope you are ready for the best day of your life." "What do you mean?" "Federal agents are executing search warrants on Victoria Sterling's properties as we speak. The FBI Financial Crimes Unit has been building a case based on the evidence we gathered, and this morning they got approval to take down her entire organization." We drove toward my farm, but Jake took a detour that kept us outside the 500-yard restraining order boundary. From the hilltop overlooking my property, we could see black SUVs with federal license plates surrounding the construction site. Victoria Sterling was standing next to her white Mercedes, talking frantically on her phone, while FBI agents in bulletproof vests searched the hotel construction site and seized documents from the construction trailers. "Jake, how is this possible? I thought federal investigations took years." "They do, usually, but your case was the missing piece in a much larger investigation. The FBI has been tracking money laundering through construction projects for 3 years. Victoria Sterling's operation gave them everything they needed to connect the dots." Agent Sarah Chen, no relation despite the shared last name, was the lead investigator on the case. She approached Victoria Sterling with an arrest warrant and a team of agents who clearly meant business. "Victoria Sterling, you are under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, racketeering, and conspiracy to commit federal crimes." Victoria's confident facade cracked for the first time since I had met her. "This is ridiculous. I demand to speak with my attorney." "You can call your lawyer from federal custody, Ms. Sterling. You have the right to remain silent." Her 3 bodyguards tried to leave quietly, but FBI agents were waiting for them too. Conspiracy charges for anyone who participated in the criminal enterprise, even if they were just muscle for hire. The corrupt county officials who had approved Victoria's fraudulent documents were arrested at their offices simultaneously. Sheriff Bradley Morrison was handcuffed at the county courthouse, charged with accepting bribes and conspiracy to obstruct justice. But the most satisfying moment came when Agent Chen walked over to the construction site with a federal seizure order. "This entire project is built on criminally obtained property using laundered money. All construction stops immediately, and all equipment will be impounded as evidence." The construction workers abandoned their equipment, and fled the scene like rats leaving a sinking ship. Within 2 hours, my property was quiet for the first time in weeks. Jake and I watched from the hilltop as Victoria Sterling was loaded into a federal transport vehicle, her designer business suit replaced with an orange jumpsuit and shackles. The woman who had threatened to destroy my life was now facing federal charges that could put her in prison for the rest of her life. Jake, how did you know the FBI would move this fast? Because Victoria Sterling made a crucial mistake. She used the same shell companies and offshore accounts that the FBI had been tracking in connection with organized crime money laundering. Your property theft was just one small part of a massive criminal enterprise. Agent Chen drove up to meet us on the hilltop, carrying a folder full of evidence and good news. Mr. Chen, I want you to know that your cooperation in this investigation has been invaluable. Victoria Sterling's criminal organization has been completely dismantled. What happens to my property now? All fraudulent claims against your land have been voided by federal court order. The hotel construction will be demolished at government expense, and the land will be restored to its original condition. You should be able to return to your home immediately. The paperwork was extensive, but the legal remedy was complete. Every document Victoria Sterling had filed claiming ownership of my property was ruled fraudulent. Every permit she had obtained was declared invalid. Every official who had accepted her bribes was facing federal charges. But the most important news came last. Mr. Chen, Victoria Sterling has been ordered to pay full restitution for damages to your property, legal fees, and punitive damages for the emotional distress she caused. The total settlement amount is $2.3 million. I stared at Agent Chen, unable to process what she had just told me. $2.3 million. Paid from the seizure of Victoria Sterling's assets. Her houses, cars, bank accounts, and offshore investments are all being liquidated to compensate her victims. That evening, I walked across my own property for the first time in 2 weeks, no longer afraid of violating a restraining order issued by corrupt officials. The construction equipment was gone, but the foundation and steel framework remained as evidence of how close Victoria Sterling had come to succeeding. The FBI had moved faster than anyone expected, but Jake explained that Victoria Sterling's arrogance had been her downfall. She thought she was untouchable because she had bought local officials, but federal agents do not answer to county sheriffs or corrupt politicians. She walked into a trap that had been waiting for someone exactly like her. Justice had finally been served, but the real satisfaction was yet to come. 6 months later, I sat in a federal courthouse in Philadelphia, watching Victoria Sterling receive her sentence. The judge was thorough and unforgiving. Ms. Sterling, you have been convicted of wire fraud, money laundering, racketeering, and conspiracy. Your criminal enterprise targeted vulnerable property owners and used corruption to steal millions of dollars in real estate. This court sentences you to 12 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. Victoria Sterling, no longer the confident woman in designer suits, stood quietly as the judge continued. You are also ordered to pay $4.2 million in restitution to your victims, and all of your assets will remain seized until full compensation has been paid. The corrupt county officials received sentences ranging from 2 to 8 years. Sheriff Bradley Morrison got 5 years and the loss of his pension. The construction company executives who had knowingly participated in the fraud received hefty fines and federal convictions that would follow them for life. But the most satisfying justice was not delivered by the court system. With the restitution money, I established the Sarah Chen Memorial Legal Defense Fund, providing free legal representation for property owners fighting HOA abuse and municipal corruption. Jake Morrison became the full-time investigator, using his FBI connections to help people who could not afford to fight back against wealthy developers and corrupt officials. The fund helped 17 families in the first year alone, elderly couples facing foreclosure due to HOA liens, veterans whose properties were being seized through eminent domain abuse, families like mine who had been targeted by criminal organizations disguised as community development. Jake and I also worked with a documentary filmmaker to tell the complete story of Victoria Sterling's criminal enterprise. The film, titled Stolen Ground, aired on Netflix and became a national sensation. It led to congressional hearings on HOA abuse and new federal legislation protecting property owners from fraudulent development schemes. But the most important change happened right here on my farm. I used part of the restitution money to restore Sarah's vegetable garden exactly as she had designed it. Heirloom tomatoes, cucumbers, corn, and her prize-winning pumpkins. Every spring, I plant new seeds and remember the woman who made this place a home. The rest of the property has become something Sarah would have loved. A working farm that provides fresh vegetables to the local food bank. A teaching garden where neighborhood children learn about sustainable agriculture and environmental stewardship. On quiet mornings, I still sit on the wraparound porch with my coffee, watching the sunrise over land that truly belongs to me. The oak trees that hid our surveillance cameras now shelter bird nests and provide shade for the children who come to learn about farming. Martha Henderson still lives next door with her cats and apple trees. The Johnson family still runs cattle on the property to the east. We still look out for each other, still share vegetables from our gardens, and still gather for barbecues on summer evenings. Victoria Sterling thought she could steal my land because grief had made me weak. Instead, she discovered that grief had made me stronger, smarter, and absolutely determined to protect what Sarah and I had built together. The farm is quiet now, filled with the sounds of growing things and children's laughter. It is exactly what Sarah would have wanted.